grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see. Thank you.
Look, sister, we needed that.
I did too.
We needed that. So thank you. What's your name?
Andrina Hollis.
Andrina Hollis. What kind of work do you do?
I'm a mathematics teacher, 7 through 12.
And what school?
Minor high school in Jefferson County.
All right, let's give our educators.
Why not Birmingham? If you know like I do, like the rest of the country does, if you knew what the rest of us thought about you, which is, wow, that's a powerful people. You are legendary in the world. You are legendary. And it's tough watching a legend be beat like this. Just watch you get just pummeled. When you got so much fight left in you. You taught the rest of us how to fight. Are your children worth it? Are your children worth you making a new mistake and creating opportunities where there should be? Your children are as beautiful and powerful as any, but they're only as beautiful and powerful as the systems around them. They are dim because you're not shining the light on them. The only way out of the circumstance, the only way is through quality education. Nothing else. Nothing. What's important to understand is that most of the educational policies that you need to be in place can actually just be local. You don't need a governor to come in and let you do these things. Most of the decisions that you need to make, you can make. You don't need a congressman, you don't need a president, you don't need anybody. You don't need Johnson to send troops in anymore. Like, all that's done. Y'all did that. You did that. Actually, everything that you need to decide upon right now, you could do as city council people, as a board of education members, as parents. You could do all those. You could put all those things in place just by board of education meetings. So the policies that you need in order to make the fundamental changes that you need, you actually can do it locally. Because ultimately, that's where it's going to be done. Is you must go to your board of education and tell them that you need to begin to have operators come in and operate some of these schools. They have to. And that you can put together whatever policies you wish to locally about committees of parents, committees that will make those decisions. And then you are the taxpayers. You're the ones. They're your schools. And you can create whatever circumstances are legal in this state, which would mean, for instance, I don't ever want you to think that I'm a charter operator. Not like there's something bad about that, but I don't want you to think I lean towards any particular type of school. I just like good schools. I don't care if they're online schools. I don't care if they're charter schools or magnet schools or traditional neighborhoods. I don't really care as long as they're good. But what you need to do is make sure that you decide very specifically where I tell you what to do. I would think at least 30% of your schools right now should be run by someone else. It's just too much for what you do. What it looks like and has looked like to me over the years, and this is not just you, that I was actually considered be a superintendent of a very large, well-known district, and I didn't want to do it at all, so that's why I went to the interview with no resume. I don't Let's see, when you have friends like Michelle, they always have people calling you trying to offer you jobs, and they don't listen so well that you like what you do. So what I've said to many of the larger school systems is you're just over capacity. You just don't have the capacity to run as many schools as you currently operate. You can't go in and monitor the principals and monitor the data and put in place the systems that are necessary to monitor the overall progress. And so a number of those schools need to actually be locked off. And that the role of the administration and central office becomes monitoring the monitors as opposed to being responsible for what used to be. What is happening, unfortunately, now we're at a stage where the old and the new are breaking. And what that means is there was a time when you had a central office where you'd have a head of English, and she could be the head of English because there were like 3 high schools, and you know what I mean, and she could do something like that, and a couple hundred kids, a couple thousand. But now when you got almost 30,000 kids, and it's just different. You need to run a different type of school system. You need to run a portfolio school system, which means you have different types of options. Also having homeschool options. You have to diminish the strain on the system. Even if you had great superintendents, and I presume you do, I don't want you to hear me say anything disparaging about any. I would if I felt it, but I just don't feel that way. The system itself is incapable of supporting the number of students and the number of needs of the students that the students have. So you need to have a different model. Otherwise, you get exactly the same thing. You have to make some fundamental shifts immediately, like within the year. You guys should really be putting those things together now. Really. Now,
president when Michelle was in D.C. And so when
He was making my life miserable every day.
Well, I did what unions do. All right? I did what unions do. And so when Michelle came, you know, because look, here's the reality, and I'm going to be serious about this, right? Michelle came at a time when the city was changing from Board of Education to mayoral control, right? And so the previous contract I had negotiated, we did what unions do, right? We spend money to get our board members elected, right? And so when I sit down to negotiate a contract as a union member, previously when the superintendent said, I want to talk about tenure, I want to talk about the best teachers in the classroom and not just letting teachers go by seniority, I'd pick up the telephone after session, I'd call my board member. Look, your boy talking crazy. Give him a call. He wants to talk about seniority. He wants to talk about putting the best teachers in the classroom. You need to give him a call, because we got you elected. You know how much money we spent campaigning for you last year? And now they want to talk about changing something? All of a sudden, at the next negotiation session, the superintendent's changed his tone. That's the politics of how we operate as unions. So when Michelle came, all of a sudden there was no Board of Education, right? So she comes to the table and we're going to talk about change. So I was like, okay, we're going to get you too. We don't know what to do about you. So I run up to the mayor's office, right? I said, I want to meet with the mayor. Because this lady is talking about keeping the best teachers and letting the worst teachers go. No way. We do this thing by seniority, right? We don't care how good the teacher's teaching. If you come in last, you got to go, right? And so I go to the mayor's office. The mayor says, well, I told Michelle when she came, I'm going to let her do what she has to do. So all of a sudden, I don't have anybody that I can go to stop this thing. I don't have anybody. The city council has no authority. We don't have a school board. But it's the best thing that could happen to me. Because for once, I had to begin to analyze whether my position as a union leader was really about children, or was it really about adult issues? Does it really make sense that if you got 4,000 teachers and you got to let 200 of them go, does it really make sense to say, just send the last 200 Why don't you say, let's keep the best 3,800 of those teachers? Because that's what we want in front of our children. I had to start analyzing. Was my position as a union leader right? Because see, in the past, all I had to do was call my board member and I never had to talk about it. I didn't have to justify my views. But it was one of the best things that happened. And then I had an experience with a little girl one day, right? I was going out to a school and, speaking to a group. I think these were like maybe third graders. And so when I'm talking to children, they get to ask you, what do you do? Right? So as a union president, I say to them, I make sure that your teachers get the kind of things that they need in order for you to get a good education. And I also make sure that you got the best teachers in front of you. And so when I'm getting ready to leave, like this little girl, like I guess she's 8 years old or so, right? She runs up and just hugs me. And like kids can give you like some real love, can't they? Right? And so I'm kind of like wondering why she hugging me, right? And so she says, because you said you care about us. And you said you make sure we got the best teachers, right? So I'm getting in my car and I'm driving back home and the Opal calls it these aha moments. But I'm driving back home, but it was just something about that experience that I just said to myself in the car, you lied to that little girl. She came up and gave me that hug and really believed me that I cared about her and make sure they got the best teachers. And so I'm saying, you lied to that little girl. You don't care if she's got the best teachers. You just spent $10,000 on an arbitration case to put a bad teacher right back in the classroom in front of little girls like that. And so it became a reality check for me that, okay, you just spent $10,000 of union money to put a teacher back in the classroom that you won't get anywhere near your little 4-year-old grandchild. But it's okay for that teacher to go and teach other people's children. So I had to come to grips with, who am I? Am I the George Parker that is a union president that says to my fellow people in the low-income community, I'm going to fight to spend money to make sure I put the bad teacher in front of you. But it didn't bother me because I can send my little granddaughter to another school. And so I had to decide, does everybody's child deserve what my child and my grandchild deserves? And that's the answer. And it made me go back to where I came from. It said, look, you grew up poor. Education was my only way to get any chance at the American dream. And here I am sending the bad teachers right back to the same little girl who was me. Great education was her only way out. And so I came to a whatever you want to call it, realization that I couldn't do it that way any longer. I had to do what was right for kids. And that's why I'm here today. I'm probably one of the only union presidents in the country that are saying the things that I'm saying. But I'm saying them because it's right for kids. It's right for kids. As a union, let me tell you, as an African-American community, and I'm very honest about this, as a union president, we knew how to deal with you. We knew how to deal with you. When they taught charter schools, we had meetings to talk about how do we stop this. And one of the things that we do in the African-American community, we're a very emotional community. There are union leaders who sit down and they plot, okay, we want to stop charter schools. How do we influence the African-American community? We know where you came from. We got slavery history. We're used to folks taking advantage of it. So let's put the message out there. Charter schools is a group of old white folks or some money-hungry folks that want to take money from your public schools and make money off your children. And all of a sudden we get the African-American community being scared. Yep, they want to come in and take advantage of us. Not true. But as unions, we knew how to do it. Vouchers. We knew how to play the voucher game. Right? Oh, they want want to take money. They just want to give it to you to go to those private schools. You just let them do it, and sooner or later they'll be giving it to Catholic schools. Right? And listen, they'll give it to him. Then they start separating us, right? They're going to give it to his job, and they're not going to give it to those jobs. We knew how to separate the African-American community from what's best for their children because we know they're emotional people, and what we do is present data to you that appeals to your emotions. Closing schools, right? African-Americans, we know. From a union standpoint, I never wanted the school closed. Why? Because that meant some of my teachers were going to lose jobs. That's less money coming into the what? Union. So you got 3 schools within a 10-block radius that could house 2,000 kids, and you only got 700 kids. But as an African-American community, let's keep all 3 open. And as a union, we biting off that. We're going to keep saying to you instead of, it makes financial sense. That if you got 3 schools that can hold 2,000 kids, and you only got 700 kids, close 1 or 2 of those schools and take the money and make the one school right. But from a union standpoint, you talk about cutting some teachers if you do that. So let me join the African-American community and let's fight together to keep that school from closing. So then you have to decide, well, what message am I going to give these black folks? Let's make the black folks feel you're taking something from them. So what we do is we say, oh, see, they're closing schools here, aren't they? Look over there in the white community. They aren't closing any schools. Well, guess what? Those schools in other communities are full. So we are experts at playing with your emotions and making you think we are protecting you. Because the minute the union comes in, we start. Oh yeah, they're trying to close your school. We're with you now. Now black folks just believe, oh boy, the union is with us. No, we're trying to save our teachers. Because it takes more teachers to service 3 schools than it does 1. We're trying to preserve our union dues. Now that is a reality that I tell you my colleagues would want to kill me if I'm telling you this, but trust me. That be aware when folks come to you claiming they're fighting for you and tell you emotional things. Because they know we don't like for folks and we don't trust folks. We don't trust folks coming into our community. Right? So all you do is tell us if you can paint it in a way that we feel that there are some white folks or some other black folks, and we, as unions, I got to give it to us. As unions, we are much better at simplifying the message that education reformers are. We know how to give you the one-liners. So when you see black folks that come in with charter schools, we had to figure out, well, now how do we get white folks to kind of turn against black folks? Well, we got to say that the black folks is a figurehead for the white folks. So that's our message. That these companies coming in here, yeah, they got black faces, but there's some white folks behind them making all the money. So then black folks again become a little bit scary. It's like, see somebody trying to take advantage of us, so we don't really care. He's just speaking for somebody else. Be aware. Then look, I said to a family when I spoke to a parent conference in New York, I said that if you look at your child's school, and your child's school is not succeeding, and you look at a charter school down the street, and they are succeeding, and here comes George Parker, another union president, telling you, let's get rid of the charter schools. Something's wrong with that. You need to not listen to that, because the bottom line is, children need to be educated, and technically, I don't care whether it's a charter school, a private school, a public school, or whatever, do they get educated? And I had this feeling about vouchers, and I'm going to tell you about vouchers. In my generation, most of the black kids, and I went to college in the 70s, right? We went to college on a voucher. You know what it was called? A Pell Grant. Somebody looked at my family and said, your family is so poor that in order for you to get an opportunity for a good education, boy, we're going to have to give you some money to go to another school and you don't have to pay it back. Now, you don't have to call it a voucher. Look, it's money that I don't have to pay back that someone is giving me to try to get an education. They call it Pell Grant. Well, then, if it's okay for me as a high school graduate, that if I'm in poverty and you're giving me money to say that gives me access to a college that I need, then why is it so wrong for kids in K-12? That if you're so poor and you trapped into a poor school, and here's somebody saying, here's some money we'll give you to try to help you get access to a school. What's wrong with that? Is it the name? Let's call it a Pell Grant. Let's not call it a voucher. But it's all about money to help you get access to a quality education. That's it.
I'm going to anoint you in the name of Jesus.
Us. As I said, we have, but somebody that looks like us is coming in ahead of the game plan to confuse us. My question is how do we get inside of the heads of our community and take all of that great data that we know, 90%, 96% African American, go to the Birmingham City school system, and the system is failing. How do we get that knowledge to the level that's important? And I do not think you can do that without dealing with the impact of poverty on those parents and those families that are sending those children to school and not coming to support the changes that need to be made.
Awesome. Who would like to address that? Anybody? Eric, you take that?
Yeah, so let me just first start off with this whole idea of white Republicans. Someone told me that sometimes people can do the right thing for the wrong reasons. And then Churchill said that no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, permanent interests. And the real question is, what is the interest, right? And if somebody's working in the interest, no matter what label they call themselves, it doesn't matter. So we have to be real clear about the interest. If the interest is the advancement of the education of our children, no matter who's working towards that, Democrats, Republicans, whoever, we need to leverage whatever they have in order to support that interest. So being real clear on that. Secondly, I talk about those 5 gaps. Number one, we have to believe what's possible for our children. See, a lot of times we settle for these type of statistics because we don't believe that there's nothing else that's possible for our children. Someone told me that you can't hit a target that you can't see, right? If you don't believe that children can succeed at high levels, that's one of the questions that I ask any potential employee. Have you ever seen high achievement? Have you ever read about it? Have you ever produced it? Because if you haven't seen it, it's very difficult to get there. What changed a community of ministers in Minneapolis was when I presented the data from our school. And it changed their whole perspective because they believe that, black children are just destined to do poor, right? Because they saw failure all around them. But when you can see children successful, when Mayor Johnson said 96% of Birmingham is African American, well, 100% of my school was African American. I was actually excited when I saw that. And as he pointed out, what if you could take that 96%, as he said, and were successful with those students? You'd be a model for the whole country. So being able to see success, believing that's possible, will change everybody's perspective. And all you have to do is, I don't know if you have, I haven't studied the schools here in Birmingham, but there's nearby schools, public schools and charter schools. Focus on what makes them successful and say that I'm not going to settle, we're not going to settle for anything less than this. I think that that begins to change people's perspective.
I agree with you, this is a civil rights issue. But in Birmingham, and my family was from down in Hill, when we were marching to break down the barriers, it was for all the children. Now you said all the children. Well, charter schools to me will not create a solution for all the children. It's going to be for the children who happen to be lucky enough to be in those charter schools. And the second thing is, 47% of charter schools don't do any better than public schools. And I like what you said. The whole idea is how do we start a movement that will demand, finally, an end to separate and unequal education. That's what this is about.
Yeah, so thank you, sister, for that question. So let me be clear. I'm not pushing, I run a charter. We started as a private school. I'm not pushing charter school, public school, private school, all black schools, all white schools. I'm pushing great schools for our children. So that's the bottom line. The issue is there's a monopoly right now, right? There's a monopoly in public education. So one fight is, and I'm not saying, I don't think it's an either or proposition. One fight is against that monopoly, and I think we should do that. At the same time we're waging that war, we need to have the flexibility to educate our own children. Charter school legislation gives us that opportunity. It gives us an opportunity to have a proof point that it can be done. Again, as I said before, a lot of our challenge is even believing that it's possible. And so the charter schools give us the opportunity to educate not all the children. And as you said, 47%, if your statistic is correct, so 53% are doing well. And so I think that that's good for the children that are in those schools, at least the 53%. So I don't see it as an either or. I don't see it either charter or public. Right now in Minnesota, I have a collaboration with the superintendent of the Minneapolis Public Schools. They're adopting a lot of the things that we're doing at our school. Longer school day, coaching teachers. So all of the best practices that we're doing right now, I'm working with the public schools. So again, I don't see it as an either or proposition.
I just want to say a couple things on that. One, I think that while Alabama being one of the 8 states across the country that doesn't have a charter school law yet is in some ways a disadvantage, it can also be an advantage in that you can learn from the mistakes that other states have made. And one of the things that I would advocate for strongly is, to the extent that this community is interested in pushing a charter school law, you have to make sure that your law has strong accountability, which means that to the extent that there are poor performing charter schools, your accountability law has to shut those schools down. That will ensure that you don't have a whole lot of low performing charter schools. So that's one thing that can happen. But I want to address your thought about you have a few kids in charter schools and those kids are lucky. I hear, so Steve Perry, who you all I think loved and you gave a standing ovation for, this man runs one of the best schools in the entire nation. And yet people make that argument all the time about closing down his school. Well, since all kids can't have access to his school, we shouldn't allow that school to operate because not everybody can have access to it. He has 4,000 families on the wait list for his school. So one thing we can do is say, well, he shouldn't be allowed to operate because he can't serve all the kids. Or the other thing we can do is give the man some more schools. He has already said that he is willing to run more schools for the district. Why wouldn't we give him more schools so he could serve more kids? It's the equivalent of saying if we found a cure for cancer and we had 1,000 doses of it, Would we say in any world, well, if we can't cure everybody, then nobody should get? We would never say that. What we would do is we would save as many lives as we possibly could, and then we'd work really hard to make more medicine so that everybody could be solved. That to me is a fundamental thing that I think we have to address. The argument that not everyone is going to have access to it, I don't think is at all an argument for why you shouldn't have some high-performing schools. It's about finding them and then replicating them so that you can give as many students access as possible.
You're right.
Where does the technical side of this come in? I'm a product of Birmingham school system, graduated Phillips High School, graduated from George C. Wallace Junior College, graduated from the Birmingham Baptist Bible College. But my trade is I'm a master home builder by profession. I'm an electrician and a plumber. But nobody want to touch those. I learned how to do carpentry in the 5th grade at Lewis Elementary School. But then now everybody is so focused on a 4-year education. I made more money than half of you in this room with a two-year associate degree. But yet and still nobody wants to train that young man, that young woman who's in prison, who has been tried to repeat offend the prison system. Within 1 year of them being released, I stayed in that system 12 years training young men how to not become repeat offenders. Because I taught them how to use their hands, their eyes, and their feet to make a dollar, where they will not be oppressed by the system in which we are looking at reading, writing, and arithmetic, which the school system are failing them. So my question is, in your charter schools, in your elementary schools, where do you start to train our boys and girls how to use their hands, how to use art as a means of making a support, how to use carpentry, all this beautiful woodwork in this room? I guarantee you, I can take a 5th grader, by the time he become a 12th grader, I can teach him how to put that Jesuit panel on that wall. Where do we put that back in the school?
Very good. Go ahead.
It warmed my heart to hear you ask that question. I actually went to a high school called Dobbins Vocational Technical School. And I went for electronics and then went to school for engineering. They had carpentry, they had welding, they had all that. So I understand and appreciate what you're saying. I also worked in 2007 with a college called Dunwoody Technical College. I helped Dunwoody Technical College to start Dunwoody High School that has vocational technical skills in that high school. So carpentry, automotive, it's a charter school. And so in Minnesota, we do have, it was the first charter school that had a vocational technical focus. And there's a number of charter schools around the country. I can't remember, I think there may be another one in Georgia that has a vocational technical focus. So again, as a charter, you could start a charter school if you had the legislation that has all of the technical skills, all of the vocational skills that you just outlined. You could start a school like that tomorrow if you had the legislation enacted here in Alabama.
Give me something else to take to my councilmen or my legislators or my government officials to say, we need to fix this problem. I know it's not a quick fix.
So, don't call me out. So, first of all, what's important to understand is that no one here told you exactly what to do. What we've done is given you examples of what things happen throughout the country. We've said there are charter schools. We've said, and you heard me talk about it, and as the brother said, an option that you have within your current structure to create educational experiences that are not charter schools, but in fact in agreement with the Board of Education. In addition to that, you heard Brother Mahmoud say talk about how his school is run. Specifically, he told you there's a longer school year. He talked about the specifics therein. He also told you that there are things that are happening at his school that they are already doing in the other schools, taking best practices. Because there's nothing that happens in his school that couldn't happen in the school that the brother who was here a moment ago was talking about he'd like to see.
That's right.
There's no magic in this. At the end of the day, what's required is to use the creativity of the community to create opportunities and to end the monopoly.
Oh, come on in now.
Because what we have now is a monopoly.
Come on in now.
We have one group who runs all of your schools. And if they were doing a fantastic job, none of us would be here having this conversation. And I'll close here. It's stunning to me to hear in this space that something can't be done.
Yes, that's right, that's right, that's right.
Not just because this is a church, but because this is 16th Street.
All right now.
Not just because this is a city, but because it's Birmingham. If at any point there was ever a group more capable of taking what seemed impossible and making it seem simple, it's here.
All right now.
And so what I expect going forward is that you'll take some of what you've heard and you'll find a way to make it make sense in your local experience and transform that into the solutions that you see. Because we're not suggesting for a moment that any one solution is in and of itself the solution, but in fact parts of a solution. Because the truth is, as you suggest, right now, we couldn't close all the schools. The mayor and I had a conversation, how many years ago? 2 years ago. And over lunch, he said, if today all the laws of the land were changed, and you could have as many alternate educational experiences as you so chose, charters, magnets, voucher, blah, blah, blah. Is there enough capacity? Are there enough operators in this country to even do it? The answer is no. Absolutely not. So inevitably, we're going to have to lean on the schools, as some of them are. And we're going to have to go in and try and zhuzh some of those up. But to take what George told you, because it's some real, I mean, I hope y'all was moved by, okay. To take what George was saying and to take what Michelle did and what Reverend Flake has done and put this all together and see it across. And what Mayor Johnson has done, who's also opened 5 schools. He's also opened schools. So there are multiple solutions before you. Every type of solution that there is right now. And if you took all parts of them and you laid them atop the district, you'd find that there are some very real solutions here. We only need to open our hearts and minds and realize that at the very least, we got to make a new mistake.
I want to just add one thing to you, and I think it goes back to what the sister was talking about over here. Look, charter schools, vouchers, and all these other things, there are avenues of trying to improve and give more options and opportunity to kids. But let's not forget now, we got children already in schools. You got public schools. What Michelle and I did in Washington, D.C. was, and we had some battles, but we came up with a contract that changed the accountability within the public schools that already exist. So there are a lot of things that you can do within the schools that are already here to start demanding that those schools produce, that those kids, that those students get educated. Now, it may require changing the relationships of how you hold teachers accountable. It may mean changing your teacher evaluation system. But you can do a lot of things right now within your schools that are operating.
That's right.
That they are maybe called failing schools.
That's right.
That you can begin to demand from your local school boards and everything else a better system of accountability, the kind of support programs in your current schools that can help your children improve their education. So I don't want you to think that the philosophy here is got to get rid of public schools. No. Everything that was done in D.C. and now the fruits are paying off. D.C.'s kids had the biggest growth in the country. That was public schools. But we had to have some fights. And some of the fights Michelle and I had, because in the public schools, this is where the unions are the strongest. And when you start talking about creating teacher evaluations and holding people accountable in the public schools, that's where you're going to get the great pushback. But that does not mean you still can't do it. Because education is still going on. Your kids are still walking in somebody's classroom every day. And you have a right, and you should still demand when they walk into that classroom that the teacher is performing. That's the encouragement. So this is something you can do immediately, locally. Begin to put pressure on people to create accountability systems within the public schools as they exist.
All right, then.
All right, so as we close, I know the sister has a question. You have a question, sister. I'm gonna have you guys after it's over come up, and then you can address the question.
Can I just say one thing?
Hold on one second. Hold on one second.
One
so
second.
I want to hold on one second.
One second.
No, I'm saying 1 second. You, I got the mic. Hold on.
10 seconds.
So let me say this: that you guys have been an incredible audience, and you've had really, really good questions. And as you can see, you have some of the brightest, most talented people in this country who are here today in Birmingham. And I think we owe them. I want to say there was a couple quick takeaways, and then we have Mayor Bell to kind of close this out. So one is, education is a civil rights issue of our time.
Come on in now.
I think we've said that. And as a result, Birmingham should be at the forefront. And that's something that everyone here feels very strongly about. Also, we all know that all kids can learn. And that you have a chance with 96% of your kids being African American. Why not have this be the proof point in the country about what can happen? Change has to come from the community. And it's going to be you as a community that has to lead this change going forward. I think faith leaders are going to play a critical role in doing that. I think Dr. Perry did a great job talking about closing failing schools or finding operators and replicating what's worked and making a new mistake. You can't keep doing the same things the same way. And it is my hope on behalf of the youth, the National Conference of Black Mayors, Mayor Bell, and all of you in here today that we can continue this dialogue.
Thank you, Mayor Johnson. As the president of the National Conference of Black Mayors, you understand that it's imperative that we do something about the educational process that takes place in our cities each and every day. It affects our ability to attract jobs. It affects our ability to create responsible citizens. It affects our ability to maintain our neighborhoods. Education is sort of that nebulous factor that we take for granted, but we don't take it for granted. And I say it in that, from that standpoint, that over the years I've seen the degradation of our school system. And it's really about leadership. It's really about stepping up in the face of naysayers and doing the right thing for our children. That right thing may be many different things, but first of all, you got to have the gumption to say, I'm going to make a change. But we're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. We're starting to see new leadership step up to the plate to say, we're willing to take on this monster, and we're willing to tame this monster so that our children are not part of the political process, but the educational process. And that's what we've had a battle for too long, the politics of education, and not the education of our education system. So hopefully what you have imparted to us today will not only have an impact here, but all throughout the country.